Hi.
Okay, welcome everyone to another Creator Hangout with Kickstarter, a weekly series of live Q&As with creators from our community. My name is Liz Cook. I'm the documentary film outreach lead here at Kickstarter. I work directly with filmmakers to help guide them with their projects on Kickstarter, everything from feedback on their project pages to help with the outreach strategy. And I'm lucky to be here on Hangouts with Dawn Porter, and I'm an incredible documentary filmmaker and voice in our community. Her previous film, Gideon's Army, a documentary profiling young public defenders, was nominated for a number of prestigious awards, played at Sundance, and now Dawn and her team will be heading back to Sundance for a second time with an upcoming film, Trapped, which she ran an incredibly successful Kickstarter project for not too long ago. Trapped exposes the effects that targeted regulation of abortion providers have on American women. So we'll be taking questions live here on Google Plus and also on Twitter at Kickstarter Tips. And actually, we already have a question from the community. So with that, hi, Dawn. I'll let you speak.
Hi. Hi, Liz. How are you?
Well, how's it going? How does it feel to be heading back to Park City with a second film?
It feels really good. We really weren't sure with this film if we were going to be ready. And so we were like really scrambling. And then a few things happened. Sometimes it feels like, there's a documentary film god and like whatever's supposed to happen happens. But one of the things that happened with this film is the Supreme Court of the United States decided to hear an argument involving our main characters. So this is one of those films where it's incredibly topical. We were literally shooting. We shot like after we submitted, just because so much is happening. So it's always like an incredible honor to go to a prestigious film festival, Sundance or South by or all of them. But for this one, because of the timing of everything that's happening, it's incredibly important for the life of this film to be able to have this early a start, because we're working also on a really interesting, and we're going to come roaring a theatrical and screenings.
It's frozen a bit. Is that okay to continue?
So this gives us get going with that.
Hey, Don, we're having a couple of technical difficulties, but I think we'll just keep on trucking if you can hear me all right. Hey, Don, can you hear me all right? We're having some technical issues connecting here. Hey, Don, sorry about that. Some technical difficulties. Can you hear me all right?
I can. Everything's good.
So maybe just for the sake of everyone, if you could just sort of repeat that last bit about the timeliness and the excitement around heading to Park City.
Sure. I mean, every documentary film has its own lifespan, and it's one of the things I like about it is we don't know where it's going to be. We know where it begins. It's with us, with our ideas, and with our characters and what they're doing, but we don't know where it's going to end. And for this film, we've been kind of chasing the news. So the film follows abortion clinics in the Deep South as they're trying to comply with a whole host of new regulations. And one of the things that happened while we were making the film and right after we had submitted to Sundance, actually, was that the Supreme Court decided to hear a case that we had been following involving our main characters. So that's a little bit of documentary God luck. And so it's one of the reasons why, besides it being prestigious and a wonderful platform and such a wonderful festival, but one of the reasons we're so grateful and thrilled about Sundance is because it really is the kickoff of what we hope is just, a really, really robust screening campaign. And actually, that does bring me back to Kickstarter, because I really do feel like we had to do so much planning for the Kickstarter that was the first time we really kind of in a concrete way put together our audience, who are we going after? Who are we trying to get the word out to? And so doing work with you and your team, in advance, and I don't know if you want to talk about that, but I think it's one of the great things about doing a Kickstarter is you don't just throw up your campaign and hope. There's so much planning that goes in, and that process of planning was really the beginning of our outreach campaign for the film that we are now building on.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. I mean, how did you break down the strategy of like who you were going to go after? Obviously you start with the people that but organizations and different groups like that. What is the sort of rough outline sketch when you just sat down day one?
We were really thinking about, there's always there's that inner circle, there's a choir of people who are already active in your issue. And then there's the people that the gettables, people who are interested and sympathetic, but they're not active. And then there's way beyond that. And those are just either people who like film or people who are nice people. And so we kind of separated our it's in how aware people were of what was happening. And so first we went out to the advocacy groups. Like, we're making this film, we're working on this issue. Would you talk about our campaign to your lists? And a number of them did that. And here's where I have the most amazing digital producer ever. Really, really smart and active and creative and fun. And so he really did that kind of mining of those super active groups. And then from there, then we also have all of our other networks from Gideon's Army, people who might, be interested in me as a filmmaker, our friends, our families, other networks from work. So we expanded that way. And then we did a lot of brainstorming with the Kickstarter teams about, where are there some overlap? People who are interested in reproductive access might overlap with women's groups. It might overlap with some political groups. It might overlap with other, we tried to create a broad list and think about our outreach that way, just like beyond the core of our particular topic. And it really is, it's a nice creative exercise to think about your audience that way. I think sometimes it's not that you forget about your audience, but you're so focused on your film and what you want to say, that it's really, really nice to think about people engaging with your work in both a creative and also, kind of a substantive way.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And I noticed that, even today you were able to send a really nice update that's like, before you get to Park City for Sundance, these are the issues at hand. This is what we're looking at. And it's just, Another great example of how you've been able to use connect with the community that you've built thus far and continue that relationship well beyond the Kickstarter project.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the most important things that you can do through your Kickstarter is you get these great lists, and you can see who's clicking on messages, who's actually interacting and being engaged. So we used that initial list and who the active people were. So we had a really good idea, so we've timed this initial message before the hoopla of the festival comes out to be like, hey, you are our people, you're coming with us. And we didn't forget about you after you gave us, your money. You really are. We really want you to be our megaphones. And that campaign, by the way, today was incredibly successful. I think we got like a 75% click-through rate, which is really
Amazing.
Great.
Yeah.
So those are active people. They're reading the messages. They're not just, cluttering inboxes.
Absolutely. So maybe I'll jump to a question that we have submitted here. It speaks to a little bit of what you were saying before, but it says, how long have you been working on bringing Trapped to the screen? Years of research prior to shooting. How long does it take to shoot? You were saying that you were even shooting after you submitted to Sundance.
Yeah.
So speak a little bit to that process.
Sure. So I started Trapped in 2013, right after Gideon's Army. And it really started, I read an article in the Mississippi, the Jackson Clarion Ledger is a local newspaper in Jackson, Mississippi, stating that there was only one abortion clinic left in the entire state. And I was shooting on a different project. I was shooting on Spies of Mississippi, a second film. And I just couldn't believe that was the case. And so I just called up the clinic and went over there. And I, that first day, met Dr. Parker, who became a main character in the film. And he was nice enough to talk to me. And then he lived in Chicago at the time. So he invited me to Chicago, where I said, I really think that this could be a great film. How would you feel about being followed? And he was really open to it. So, it's been this last, couple years that I've been following all the clinics and all the twists and turns of their experiences. So it's about 2.5 years. And that's even a little short for a documentary. I mean, some people, 3 years, probably about average, could be 5, 6, 7.
Definitely. Yeah. So we have a quick question here. When and how can I see the film? So if you want to speak to that, I mean, it's
Sure.
premiering.
So our festival life begins at Sundance, but the film, I'm thrilled to announce, will be on Independent Lens.
Yeah, congrats.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome.
In June. And we don't have an exact air date. I'm not even sure it's going to be June. I probably shouldn't have said that, but we're hoping for a June air date. Stay tuned. And you can also look up our Trapped website, and we'll have local screenings. The other thing I want to mention is we are doing something pretty radical with this film because of the timeliness of the issue. We are doing a simultaneous theatrical tour as well as a community engagement tour. And so Abramarama, which is a theatrical distributor, is booking us into theaters around the country. And then our awesome Film Sprout partners, Caitlin Boyle, is booking us through universities. So so you can see it often and happily.
Great, that's amazing. And all that information will be updated on your website?
Yes. If people check into our website, I think we should have a pretty good screening schedule up by February. So if you're not with us at Sundance, then please check that website and we'll update, and then you can also bring a screening to your town. So that's one of the things, if you have an advocacy group that would like to host, quote unquote, host a screening, we're working with Film Sprout, so groups can do that.
Great, fantastic. And I guess I will remind everybody that they can submit questions through Google Plus and through Twitter at Kickstarter Tips. So both Gideon's Army and Trapped are based in the American South, and I believe you're from New York. Is that right?
I'm from the Bronx, yes.
Yeah, so talk about what's drawn you to that region specifically.
I mean, I think when I went down to Alabama for the first time for Gideon's Army, I didn't really have any experience being down there, and to the extent that making a film gives you any experience. But there's something really, to generalizations, but there's something very open about Southerners. They're on the whole kind of welcoming and
Southern hospitality.
honest. Yeah, there's something to that. And so despite the fact that a lot of the characters I follow are struggling living there, um, there's so many great people, and it's beautiful there, so it's very cinematic. But like any place, it's the stories that you find. So both stories and the characters that I was kind of completely obsessed with. They're located down there. And actually, then recently I did a short for Amazon based on the New Yorker, stories from the New Yorker magazine. And that was also set in the South. And there's just something very lyrical and kind of creatively inspiring there. But my Alabama passport may be revoked after this film. So we'll see.
That's actually
back to New York.
Yeah. That's actually a perfect segue into another question that was just submitted that says it's not an easy thing to publicly discuss and advocate for reproductive rights. How have things like the clinic shooting in Colorado affected your process? And yeah.
That's a great question. I really took a cue from my characters. And so Dr. Parker, for example, he travels around the South providing abortion care because there are almost no doctors in Southern clinics. And they have been either targeted physically or shamed, local doctors. And so there are a lot of brave doctors like him, and they fly in. And, I'm going to be honest. I mean, it can be scary. You go into an abortion clinic, there's a lot of people who say they're praying for you, but they are very aggressive and mean. And over the course of the film, you try and be safe and smart. And I asked the characters, how are they safe? What are their safety protocols? And we followed all of them. We certainly made it very clear to them no filming was worth anybody's safety, so we had safety protocols. And then I think that nothing strange happened, although when you're in an abortion clinic there's lots of strange things that happen. But Colorado has impacted all of us. It was a grisly and gruesome reminder that while this film focuses on the political realities and obstacles to reproductive choice and access, there's still a very real physical danger. So I think every documentarian has to think about safety, not only for yourself, but for your characters. And you have to make good choices, So we do have a safety team in place, actually.
And you had mentioned the impact campaign that's going to be sort of widespread. And what kind of, events, like what, for somebody who's necessarily, not necessarily done any work like that, what does that look like?
Well, with Gideon's Army, we did a really long screening tour where communities could offer to host the film, and then if they would secure the location, then what we would do is I had some grants to fly in and do a talk back, or we would fly in some of the characters, or we would work with local criminal justice experts. And so I learned a ton from that campaign. And one of the things I learned is that you should hire a great professional. So we are working with Film Sprout, and they did the campaign for the Invisible War.
They're amazing.
And they're amazing. And Hunting Ground. And so they're fantastic, smart, strategic thinkers about that anyway. But it was really just such a natural fit for this film. So we got a grant to do work with them, where they will book university screenings, community screenings in as many places as possible. So we're really hoping for, hundreds of screenings between now and the time that the Supreme Court decides, is Roe v. Wade going to stay the law of the land? Are women going to have access to clinics around the country? And so it's a hugely important part of the rollout of this film. And I think filmmakers should be thinking about, we call it outreach, but it's really part of distribution, because all of distribution is getting to an audience. So this is just another way to get to audiences, and we're getting to really active, noisy audiences who vote. And so that's what this will do. So we'll do community screenings. If you're a group or on campus place that wants to host a screening, there'll be a way for you to get in touch and for us to do that. And then we will support those groups by bringing guests and organizing panels. We have printed and written materials about choice, about access, about what's happening in local communities. So that's what we do at our end. They just have to bring the folks and watch a movie.
Amazing. Very
yeah,
cool.
so really, really excited about that. And at the same time, it's going to be in theaters.
So lots and lots going on, lots of ways
Lots
to see
and
it.
lots yeah.
One question. So this is your third film, correct?
Yes.
Third feature.
Third feature.
Yeah. And before that, you were an attorney. And so how does that previous life blend into what you're doing now? Obviously, there's how has it, helped you navigate the topics that you're tackling as a documentary filmmaker today?
Well, I think, my prior career certainly shows up in the topics I'm attracted to. But I wasn't a public defender, so it's not like I had any special knowledge of that. But I do think part of the curiosity I bring to some of the subjects is framed by a curiosity about legal topics. So I think a lot of people understand that it's dangerous to work in an abortion clinic because of violence. What they don't understand is that the greatest threat to abortion clinics are state governments making laws that are targeted to put them out of business. And so I felt like, being a lawyer, I saw that right away, that that's what was happening. And I wanted to connect the dots and look at what that actually looked like. So I think it just, so on a creative level, I'm just trained to think that way. And then on a practical level, it's just very useful to be able to do things like get access to court. And, I wrote my own motion for access to court and I had to argue it and stuff. So anybody can do it, but I wasn't afraid to do it. So, but you shouldn't be either.
Yeah, and so I guess that's a good lead into another question. So let's say, I'm a first-time filmmaker. I read an article that really compels me to a subject, and I've done some preliminary research around it. What would you say, what's your best advice for somebody who's interested in this, but maybe hasn't taken the first step? Everybody at some point is a first-time filmmaker. So, every single one of us has been where every other first-time person is. And I think when you're approaching a subject, you want to be clear about your abilities and what you're promising. And so if you don't have a long track record, that doesn't mean you can't do something incredible and beautiful. It just means you should be upfront with people about, I want to make a film. I think that I can do this because, and if they trust you and you gain access to their story, that's the kernel of what it is. Filmmaking is about your storytelling ability. So if you have confidence in that and you can convince your subjects, that's really what you need. And then as the project grows, you'll fill in where you need help. Hopefully your enthusiasm will be contagious and you'll find a great producer, a great editor, and you'll start to create your own village, and you'll start to draw from who you want to work with and who's good and who's going to complement your skills. But I wouldn't, I think if you're honest with people, and that starts with your subjects, the film reflects that. Most people do like to talk. And if you're genuinely curious in somebody, it's pretty flattering for someone to say, I want to follow you with a camera. Yeah.
They may not understand that it's going to be like 3 years from now, you're still going to be with them, but
Right.
they kind of get used to you, and then they're sad when you leave.
Yeah. You must have an incredible relationship with those people now. And
Yeah, it's very close. It's very intense, and you're used to being with them on such a continual basis that it is a little bit of a loss when it's done. So the festival experience is really, really fun because then they get to see what you saw in them through everybody else's eyes,
absolutely.
and that's something I really love sharing with them.
So a couple more minutes left here. Again, if people have questions that they're really excited to ask Dawn, please submit them through Google Hangouts or at Kickstarter Tips on Twitter. We have a question from someone asking about other films, if you've seen After Tiller and sort of how that's played into your work. I'm sure you're friends with Lana and Shane, Martha Shane, and those folks.
I have seen After Tiller, and it's an exquisitely beautiful film. And when I started working on this film, they were like my first phone call, and they have just been so. Doc people are usually we're good, but they kind of educated me a lot about the community. They've provided resources, like people to call. So and I really admire their style. They have a very lyrical, beautiful style, and I appreciate the sensitivity with which they treated their subjects. So I that's kind of my style too. Like I'm not a loud person. So it was really helpful to see, because there is something in common I think abortion providers have is they're very, very sympathetic people, and sometimes they seem soft, but they're very, very strong.
Mm-hmm.
You can't do this work unless you've got a core of strength. And so as a filmmaker, part of your job is finding out how to show all of those complexities in a person. That's what's interesting, is this person who seems to be one thing is actually many, many things. And that's why they can do this work.
Right.
And that's what I think makes a complex film, is kind of showing all of that.
We have another question here that's kind of tied into that. It's what's most important for people to take away from this film? It's a big question.
I think one of the biggest things is that, and this is how I feel about myself, is I just had no idea how something that I thought was a constitutional right that was protected was actually so imperiled. And I think that I hope that the film will have encouraged people to talk about what is a very common medical procedure. Abortion too often is spoken about in shame and as if it's this awful, horrible thing, when it's a very common, 1 in 3 women will have an abortion in her life in America. And the idea that that would not be legal or safe is horrifying to me. So I think that there's something empowering in saying, this is my private decision to make with my physician. So I think don't be complacent. A lot of things that we think are secure are not, are a hair's breadth away from being removed. So
We have another question that it will resonate with Planned Parenthood supporters, and what might you hope the other side, political side, will take away from?
I hope they see we're here. That you can't sneak around the Constitution, and that there's a strong other way to think about individual liberty. And it's not taking over a federal building. It's actually personal bodily integrity. And that if people respect the Constitution, as many conservatives say they do, then the way to show that respect is not to do an underhand run around your constitutional rights. When Americans are presented with a choice, should there be abortion, should it be safe and legal, they overwhelmingly say it should be. And so if that's the case, that is the will of the people, and that should be respected. So I hope and I hope that there's a civilized conversation to have happen. I think we're at a point in political discourse where we don't have a lot of conversations. So I hope we can have a conversation, but if we can't, I think the people who are pro-choice can't be quiet.
And any last words for this Google Hangout?
I would say that I was definitely kicking and screaming brought to Kickstarter.
I remember.
I did not want to do it. I was so scared. I heard it was a lot of work. But it really was in the strategy and also in our team building. And then a number of supporters came back and gave bigger gifts later. So, there's a way in which it can really be a good process if you have a good team, and I have really good people working with me. So my producer, Marilyn Ness, and digital producer, Brace Kirchhoff. So we had fun with it. We treated it like a puzzle, and you can treat it like a puzzle and set a realistic goal. And it can really, there's a lot of unexpected benefits to doing it. So I'm a convert.
Cool. Well, it's so nice to chat with you, Dawn, and we're looking forward to celebrating with you out in Park City in a couple of weeks.
Getting some boots.
Yeah. All right. Take care.
Okay. Thanks.
Bye.